I walked over and sat down at the table. Shadows from late afternoon pushed into the room. They were peach-tinted, fading in and out, and the kitchen was completely silent. Even after even the refrigerator hum had died away. May had turned back to her work. She seemed oblivious to me sitting there. My mother could have learned it from a book, maybe from her mother. How did I know that thousands of households everywhere didn't use this particular roach-ridden method? I stood up and walked over to May. I felt a trembly feeling at the back of my knees. I put my hand on her shoulder. Okay, I thought. Here goes. I said, May, did you ever know a Deborah? Deborah Fontenelle? A white woman from Virginia? It would have been a long time ago. There wasn't a trace of cunning in May, and you could depend on her not to overthink her answers. She didn't look up, didn't pause, just said, oh yes, Deborah Fontenelle. She stayed out there in the honey house. She was the sweetest thing. And there it was. There it all was. For a moment I felt lightheaded. I had to reach for the countertop to steady myself. Down on the floor, the trail of crumbs and marshmallows looked half alive. I had a million more questions, but May had started humming Oh Susanna. She set down the box of crackers and got up slowly, starting to sniffle. Something about Deborah Fontenelle had set her off. I think I'll go out to the wall for a little while, she said. And that's how she left me, standing in the kitchen, hot and breathless, and the world tilted under me. Walking to the honey house, I concentrated on my feet touching down on the hard-caked dirt in the driveway. The exposed tree roots, fresh-watered grass, how the earth felt beneath me, solid, alive, ancient, right there every time my foot came down. There and there and there, always there, the things a mother should be. Oh yes, Deborah Fontenelle. She stayed out there in the honey house. She was the sweetest thing. In the honey house, I sat on the cot with my knees drawn up, hugging them with my arms and making a shelf for the side of my face to rest on. I looked at the floor and the walls with brand new eyes. My mother had walked about in this room. A real person, not somebody I made up, but a living, breathing person. The last thing I expected was to fall asleep, but when there's a blow to the system, all the body wants to do is go to sleep and dream on it. I woke an hour or so later in the velvety place where you don't yet remember what you've dreamed. Then suddenly the whole thing washed back to me. I am constructing a spiraling trail of honey across a room that seems to be in the honey house one minute and the next in my bedroom back in Sylvan. I started at a door I've never seen before and ended at the foot of my bed. Then I sit on the mattress and wait. The door opens. In walks my mother. She follows the honey, making twists and turns across the room until she gets in my bed. She is smiling, so pretty, but then I see she is not a normal person. She has roach legs protruding through her clothes, sticking through the cage of her ribs, down her torso, 6 of them, 3 on each side. I couldn't imagine who sat in my head making this stuff up. The air was now dusky rose and cool enough for a sheet. I pulled it around my legs. My stomach felt icky, like I might throw up. If I told you right now that I never wondered about that dream, never closed my eyes and pictured her with roach legs, never wondered why she came to me like that with her worst nature exposed, I would be up to my old habit of lying. A roach is a creature no one can love, but you cannot kill it. It will go on and on and on. Just try to get rid of it. The next few days I was a case of nerves. I jumped out of my skin if somebody so much as dropped a nickel on the floor. At the dinner table, I poked at my food and stared into space like I was in a trance. Sometimes the picture of my mother with roach legs would leap into my head and I would have to swallow a spoonful of honey for my stomach. I was so antsy I couldn't sit through 5 minutes of American Bandstand on television, when I ordinarily was glued to Dick Clark's every word. I walked around and around the house, pausing here and there to picture my mother in the various rooms. Sitting with her skirt spread over the piano bench, kneeling beside Our Lady, studying the recipe collection that May clipped from magazines and kept taped to our refrigerator. I would stare at these visions with my eyes glazed over, only to look up and see August or June or Rosaline watching over me. They clucked their tongues and felt my face for fever. They said, "What's wrong? What's got into you?" I shook my head. Nothing. I lied. Nothing. In truth, I felt as if my life was stranded out on the high dive, about to leap into unknown waters. Dangerous waters. I only wanted to postpone the plunge a while, to feel my mother's closeness in the house, to pretend I wasn't afraid of the story that had brought her here might go and surprise me the way she had in the dream, turning up six-legged and ugly. I wanted to march up to August and ask why my mother had been here, but fear stopped me. I wanted to know, and I didn't want to know. I was all hung up in limbo. Late Friday afternoon, after we finished cleaning the last of the supers and storing them away, Zach went out to take a look under the hood of the honey wagon. It was still acting funny and overheating in spite of Neil having worked on it. I wandered back to my room and sat on my cot. Heat radiated from the window. I considered getting up to turn on the fan, but only sat there staring through the panes of the milky blue sky, a sad, ragged feeling catching hold inside. I could hear music coming from the truck radio, Sam Cooke singing Another Sunday Night, then May calling across the yard to Rosaline, something about getting the sheets off the clothesline. And I was struck all at once how life was out there going on through its regular courses, and I was suspended, waiting, caught in a terrible crevice between living my life and not living it. I couldn't go on biding time like there was no end of it, no end to the summer. I felt tears spring up. I would have come clean, whatever happened. Well, it would just happen. I went over to the sink and washed my face. Taking a deep breath, I stuffed my mother's Black Mary picture and her photograph into my pocket and started toward the pink house to find August. I thought we would sit down on the end of her bed or out in the lawn chairs if the mosquitoes weren't bad. I imagined August would say, "What's on your mind, Lily? Are we finally going to have our talk?" I would pull out the wooden picture and tell her every last thing, and then she would explain about my mother. If only that had happened instead of what did. As I strode toward the house, Zach called to me from the truck. "Want to ride to town with me? I've got to get a new radiator hose before the store closes." "I'm going to go talk to August," I said. He slammed down the hood and smeared his hands front and back on his pants. August is with Sugar Girl in the parlor. She showed up crying. Something about Otis using their life savings to buy a second-hand fishing boat. "But I've got something really important to talk to her about." "You'll have to get in line," he said. "Come on, we'll be back before Sugar Girl leaves." I hesitated, then gave in. All right. The auto parts store sat 2 doors down from the movie theater. As Zach pulled into a parking space in front, I saw them. 5 or 6 white men standing by the ticket booth. They milled around, casting quick glances up and down the sidewalk like they were waiting for someone, all of them so nicely dressed, wearing ties with clips on them like store clerks and bank tellers. One man held what looked like a handle from a shovel. Zach turned off the honey wagon and stared at them through the windshield. A dog, an old beagle with an age-white face, wandered out of the auto parts store and began to sniff at something on the sidewalk. Zach drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and sighed. And then I suddenly realized it was Friday, and they were out here waiting for Jack Palance and the colored woman. We sat there a minute not speaking, the sounds in the truck magnified. The squeak in the spring under the seat, the tapping of Zach's fingers, the sharp way I was breathing. Then one of the men yelled, causing me to jump and bang my knee against the glove compartment. He gazed across the street and shouted, "What are you staring at over there?" Zach and I both turned and looked through the back window. 3 teenage colored boys stood on the sidewalk drinking RC Colas out of the bottle and glaring over at the men. "Let's come back another time," I said. "It'll be okay," Zach said. "You wait here." "No, it won't be okay," I thought. As he slid out of the honey wagon, I heard the boys call Zach's name. They crossed the street and came over to the honey wagon. Glancing through the window at me, they gave Zach a few playful shoves. One of them waved his hand in front of his face like he'd bitten into a Mexican pepper. "Who got in there?" he said. I looked at them, tried to smile, but my mind was on the men, who I could see were watching us. The boys saw it too, and one of them, who I would later find out was named Jackson, said real loud, "You gotta be dumb as dirt to believe Jack Palance is coming to Tiburon," and all of them laughed, even Zach. The man holding the shovel handle walked right up to the truck bumper and stared at the boys with that same half-smile, half-sneer I had seen on Tigre's face 1,000 times. A sort of look conjured from power without benefit of love, and he yelled, "What did you say, boy?" The murmuring noise in the street fell away. The beagle dropped his ears and slunk off under a parked car. I saw Jackson bite down, causing a tiny ripple across his jaw. I saw him raise his RC Cola bottle over his head and throw it. I closed my eyes as it flew out of his hand. When I opened them again, there was glass sprayed across the sidewalk. The man with the shovel handle had dropped it and had his hand over his nose. Blood seeped through his fingers. He turned back to the other men. "That boy busted open my nose," he said, sounding more surprised than anything. He looked around, confused for a moment, then headed into a nearby store, dripping blood all the way. Zach and the boys stood by the truck door in a little knot, stuck to the pavement, while the rest of the men walked over and formed a half circle around them, hemming them in against the truck. "Which one of you threw that bottle?" one man said. The boys didn't open their mouths. "Bunch of cowards," another man said. This one had picked up the shovel handle from the sidewalk and was jabbing it in the air in the boys' direction every time they moved. "Tell us which one of you it was, and you other three can go," he said. Nothing. People had started coming out of the stores, gathering in clumps. I stared at the back of Zach's head. I felt like my heart had a little ledge on it, and I was standing there leaning as far out as I could, waiting to see what Zach would do. I knew that being a snitch was considered the lowest sort of person, but I wanted him to point his finger and say, "The one over there, he did it." That way he could climb back into the honey truck and we could be on our way. "Come on, Zach." He turned his head and looked at me from the corner of his eye. Then he shrugged his shoulders slightly and I knew it was over and done. He would never open his mouth. He was trying to say to me, "I'm sorry, but these are my friends." He chose to stand there and be one of them.